Now look, I know returning to a car cleaning channel after a month of goofing off with a bike cleaning video might feel like a betrayal. I have gone out my way here to not only source some dedicated products made by a well-respected car care brand, but also to thoroughly muddy up my new two-wheeled toy for your viewing pleasure. So whether you're into spinning cogs or not, still strongly suggest you keep it in gear. So, having recently bagged this fairly well-equipped yet rock-bottom priced Ragley Mbop from Wiggle to replace the undersized old Special featured on the channel around this time last year, thought now that I'd clocked an initial 100 miles on it, I'd share its first official clean with you, as after a few recent rides in the woods was definitely in need of one. But with the Crankalicious gear I had to hand being formulated by the award-winning British-based Dodo Juice brand, was confident I'd have the British designed and tested hardtail looking box fresh and ready for amateur action again in no time.
I don't really know what comes next, I'm just doing my best even though I'm so stressed out. Everything just feels like a test that I fail, so depressed when I can't seem to get out. But something deep inside won't let me quit. I swear that I'm inspired by all this shit. Tell me that I can and I won't, that's what guides me the most. Your lies, I'll do what I want. The gas in the middle of the sun, never knew she's so bad that the kid made the right. The gas in the middle of the sun, never knew she's so bad that the kid made the right. The gas in the middle of the sun, never knew she's so bad that the kid made the right. The gas in the middle of the sun, never knew she's so bad.
Now, despite having plenty of dedicated cycle care products to get to grips with here, a simple pre-rinse was likely going to serve to remove the bulk of the dirt from the off-roader's relatively new surfaces. And while a hose pipe will do the job, a pressure washer will do a more thorough one in less time with less water. You just need to make sure you don't get too up close and personal with bearings and seals, as while they are technically watertight, that's on more of a conventional splash-proof basis rather than a targeted, highly pressurised one. But I'd intentionally whacked the pressure of my washer down considerably, so didn't really have to worry. Once the bike had been thoroughly pre-rinsed at reduced pressure, I got to work degreasing the gritty and squeaky sounding drivetrain with the viscous yet water-based Lehman Velo, which is specifically formulated for cleaning cogs, giving it a few minutes to soak following application before agitating things over with some of the supplied stiff bristles. And while Crankalicious do offer a more potent sprocket and chain degreaser, didn't think heavy solvents were necessary here, so just kept it water-based. But if your moving metal parts are older and or more deeply ingrained with dirt, then you might want to consider giving the gum chain remedy a go instead. I've then moved on to cleaning a few other metal bits and bobs with the lighter but still perfectly capable Pineapple Express spray wash, which I think is intended for a more all-encompassing bike clean, but as I'd be subsequently encompassing pretty much everything with the Crankalicious shampoo, chose to use this in a more targeted fashion, working it into the brake calipers, cranks and pedals with a soft bristled detail brush, before thoroughly cleaning up the wheels and tyres with it, as despite having been treated to a thorough pre-rinse, we're still sporting a light layer of mud, but with a full 1 litre of the product to hand could afford to be liberal with it. Then once the bits I was focusing on had been generously doused and adequately agitated, using a larger brush for the knobbles of the tyres, as although they won't stay clean for long, didn't want wads of wet crud tainting and potentially contaminating the surrounding parts. Thoroughly rinsed them off until they were fully free from it. Before contact washing the hard surfaces of the bike, I quickly treated the embossed factory saddle, which for the sake of my nuts really need to change out for something softer, to a quick once over with some epic hide cleaner, which was brushed in with a super soft item just to try and tease out any unseen poo particles that had penetrated from brown trouser moments in the woods. Of course, making sure to rinse the residue off afterwards, as while it's been slow to get its hat on this year, the late spring sun was now thoroughly beaten down. I'd filled the dedicated bike wash bucket up with a nice strong solution of Crankalicious mud honey a bit earlier on, so after loading the supplied wash mitt with its pH neutral suds, got to work spreading them over all areas of the bike, starting with the frame, to physically dislodge the light film of dirt that a contactless clean alone can't. And much like with a new car, washing a new bike over for the first time in this manner is one of the best ways to get to know it, which, if you want it to work for you when out and about, is essential. And while there was nothing wrong with the Microfibre mitt, did swap it for a smaller car wheel one part way through, which just felt more size appropriate. And while whipping the wheels off, as I did with my old Beta bike last year, would certainly improve accessibility, would guess most people are likely going to wash their bike with them on, so that's what I did here. The controls and a few other details, which while easily overlooked still need at least a light clean, were then gently sudsed over with a shampoo primed super soft brush to prevent wash mitt fibres from snagging, which seemed to make sense in the moment. Then finished up with a quick final once over of the wheels just to neutralise any lingering degreaser residue, as well as ensure they were left with the same freshly washed finish as the frame and forks, prior to everything being thoroughly rinsed off one last time in preparation for the subsequent enhancement and protection stages. When it comes to drying a bike, a blow dryer like the one I had here is perfect for quickly driving rinse water out from the various fiddly components that can serve to hold onto it seemingly forever, leaving things with a nice streak and spot-free finish. However, I understand machines like these are a bit of a luxury that most would struggle to justify for use on their daily driver, let alone occasionally used push bike. But the good news is that a simple towel dry, preferably with something suitably sized, will also do the job just fine, provided you're methodical enough, which you'll definitely want to be if you're planning to then go on to enhance and protect, as releasing trapped rinse water when doing that is never fun. So spend some time ensuring all parts of the bike are dry, whether that be with a towel, a blower or whatever else. So while I didn't think I'd have to be polishing out scuffs on a bike just a few months old, the wash had revealed a fair few of them, which was frustrating considering I've been relatively careful with it and not yet crashed. But thankfully I had some intensive frame polish to hand to hopefully help get rid. Now, while this rubbing compound type product is intended to be used by hand, I went straight in with the mini polisher on rotary mode here to save some elbow grease and give myself the best shot at knocking them back right off the bat. I just had to be careful not to blow through, which with a smaller pad is easier to do, but what I presume to be a powder coated finish thankfully seemed to brave the mini rotary storm just fine, and after a few passes at low to moderate speed the scuffs appeared to be gone for good. Now, damage like this could of course be avoided with the application of a protection film up front, which for a more expensive bike I would recommend, but for something of this value, which I only really got to hop around on in between videos, didn't think was necessary. Plus, with this one out the way, I won't be letting the surface stay that caked with abrasive mud again, so fingers crossed outside of wrapping it around a tree won't come across unsightly scuffs again anytime soon. But fair play to the polish, as it certainly did the job, so would highly recommend giving it a go if your gloss finish bike is inflicted with similar war wounds. So before moving on to thoroughly protecting things, I had one more dedicated cleaning product to put to use on the tyres to prepare them for dressing a bit later on. And while the like pneu's directions recommend it be rinsed off afterwards, I got a bit ahead of myself here and was done with the water, so went in with a dry application and towel buff instead. But being quite potent, the solution thankfully seemed to flash off in the warm weather and leave a nice, naked looking residue-free finish behind, which is exactly what was needed. And while you might be thinking what was the point, as the tyres look perfectly clean to begin with, despite having been degreased earlier, this stuff still served to tease out yet more deeply ingrained grime, making it a worthwhile endeavour and proving that clean looks can be deceiving. So with all parts of the bike now deep cleaned, it was then the turn of the Crankalicious Enduro frame sealant to lock in the freshly enhanced finish. So got to work both spritzing it directly onto the surface, as well as wiping it over with a small microfibre applicator pad to avoid cross-contamination of areas that I either didn't want protecting or would be tending to with other products. Buffing over with a perfectly sized Fur Rouge buffing towel following application to leave a nice slick feeling and glossy looking finish behind. Now again, you could remove the wheels to increase accessibility, but with this being such an easy to use wipe on wipe off type product, even if you don't, unless you're attempting to film every aspect of the application from multiple angles, should still be able to do it in a matter of minutes. And as well as noticeably improving the finish of your frame, forks and any other parts you choose to treat with it, using a product like this will also help to repel dirt and make future maintenance cleaning far less of a faff, so in my opinion is definitely worth doing. As well as the main frame sealant, I also had a small sample pot of Crankalicious's crisp frame wax. And while I wasn't initially planning to use it, thought I'd give it a go on the rims to see if I could simultaneously enhance and protect their rough cast factory finish, as mountain bike wheels do tend to attract plenty of muck, so went ahead and finger fettled a fair bit of the sweet smelling yellow paste over their surface with a gloved hand, which, aside from the accumulation of a bit of cack-handed excess around the bottom of the spokes, seemed to work quite well. Following finger application, a second Fur Rouge buffing towel was used to thoroughly remove the residue once it had hazed over, ensuring there was no brightly coloured crumbs of carnauba knocking about, and while the crude finish it left behind wasn't as slick and glossy as the frame and forks, would at least now more closely match the finish of the soon-to-be dressed tyres, plus, like the parts protected with the spray stuff earlier, be a bit easier to keep clean going forward. Before tarting up the tyres, there was one last Crankalicious product I wanted to get to grips with, so tore open a few generously saturated carboniferous matte finish quick wet wipes to hopefully smarten up the select non-glossy parts of the bike. Unlike other products designed for use on standard lacquered finishes, this stuff naturally flashes off following application, saving you time and your fingers further exertion, which, if you've been fettling to the extent I had here, is great. and while a handful of the wipes were enough for my straightforward non-glossy refreshment requirements, if you have a complete matte or satin finish bike, then a full bottle of the dedicated detail spray might be a worthwhile investment for both finishing things up post-wash as I was here, as well as keeping surfaces fresh and free from dust and light dirt in between more thorough cleans. So while that might have been it for the dedicated Crankalicious stuff, there was still a few bits I wanted to tend to for which off-brand items would have to do. So after flipping the bike over for the last time, got to work dressing the walls of the freshly stripped back chunky Maxxis tyres with a nondescript car care product. There's no cycle care brand in the right mind would recommend doing such a thing, but figured so long as I kept it to the sides and buffed back any excess before taking it for a spin would probably survive. Once it had been worked over the surface every which way with the larger detail brush, a downgraded but uncontaminated general purpose towel was then used to knock back any excessive shine and potentially slippery excess, with it being wrapped around the handle of the brush to get in between the knobbles. And while aside from a bit of aftershot snaz, it was ultimately a pretty pointless affair, it was still a satisfying one, so even though I don't recommend you do the same, hope you still appreciate the unproductive faff. With all the cleaning, enhancing and protecting taken care of, the last thing on the list for the mbop was lubrication. And while Crankalicious do offer a dedicated ceramic-based chain lubricant, it's out of stock for reformulation at the moment, so had to grab some Teflon-enriched stuff from Halfords instead. And while I don't profess to be a professional chain lubist, do feel that letting the tip of the upturned bottle bobble directly over the links as they circulate generally works quite well, as does toweling off any excess once it's been ran up and down the cassette with a few gear changes. But honestly, feel free to lubricate your apparatus however you see fit, as it's ultimately none of my business. So despite this Ragley still basically being brand new underneath all that encrusted mud, the well-formulated Crankalicious chemicals coupled with my well-formulated elbow grease still serve to bring about a better than factory finish, as they don't come spruced, spritzed and dressed like this out the box. And in order to try and keep it that way, at least for the foreseeable, we'll be sticking to hopping around on the hard surfaces when out and about instead. While I'll technically be keeping the dedicated bucket and bottles to one side for future maintenance cleaning, suspect most of this cycle oriented stuff would also work on a car's surfaces, so keep your eyes peeled for a few of them perhaps making a counterintuitive appearance in a future video, which I promise I'll be back with sooner rather than later. But for now we'll leave you with a few parting after and action shots to say thanks for sticking with this one.